A scalpel cuts into the body of a 42,000-year-old horse. It begins to bleed liquid blood. You watch the crystalline ice melt under intense, sterile laboratory lights. The temperature in the room remains under strict control, but the cold radiating from the carcass is ancient. From the thawing frost emerges preserved, glossy dark hair. A glistening, wet eye stares back at the researchers, catching the glare of the overhead bulbs. It looks fresh enough to blink. It defies the baseline rules of mortality. Dead things coagulate. Dead things calcify. Dead things belong to the dirt. But we are not digging through dirt. We are standing on top of a 40-meter-deep biological hard drive. You assume the Ice Age wiped out these prehistoric creatures. You believe the crushing cold turned them into dusty fossils, locking them away in the petrified past. That is a human-centric fiction. The Earth did not crush them into stone. The permafrost flash froze them. It preserved viable somatic cells. It preserved intact visceral organs. It preserved flowing, oxygen-deprived blood. Extinction is not a permanent erasure. In the deep ice, death is a state of biological hibernation. A paused physiological state. A waiting room in the dark. And you must ask yourself what happens when a microscopic predator that predates human civilization thaws out after 40,000 years and begins to reproduce. Do not answer that yet. Focus on the crimson fluid dripping from the steel scalpel. The Lena horse foal shatters all known biological preservation records by a staggering margin of 10,000 years. The thick blood pooling on the stainless steel table was pumped by a living, beating heart when Neanderthals still hunted in the snow. It does not dry out. It does not turn to dust. It remains suspended. Because biological freezing at this magnitude is not a termination of life. It is an evasion of it. This is cryptobiosis, the ultimate system hibernation. It is the biological equivalent of pulling the plug on a supercomputer, but keeping the RAM state frozen in time. The mechanical chassis shuts down. The metabolic engines operate at absolute zero. But the genetic data remains intact, waiting for the electrical current to return. The foal is a scientific marvel. But preserving a horse is passive data storage. Preserving a microscopic predator is an active, waking threat. Consider the umwelt of the deep ice. The sensory reality of these buried organisms. It is an absolute, lightless entombment. The ambient temperature hovers at a constant -15 degrees Celsius. No photon of sunlight penetrates this soil for 40 millennia. There is no diurnal cycle. No changing of the seasons. There is only the terrifying, static silence of a frozen epoch. The permafrost layer, Earth and Apo's cryogenic hard drive. It preserves millions of years of biological source code in an endless, dark freeze. For the organisms trapped within this matrix, there is no passage of time. The millennia compress into a single, lightless second of oblivion. They view time not as a linear march toward decay, but as a temporary environmental condition. A weather pattern they wait out. Sometimes, human arrogance intersects with this paused reality. Paleontologists in Alaska recover the body of a 36,000-year-old steppe bison. It died by the claws of a prehistoric lion, the laceration still visible on its hide. They call the carcass Blue Babe. Its flesh survived in the cryogenic conditions of the subterranean Earth. The researchers do not just study it. They sever a piece of the ancient neck meat. They boil the muscular tissue in a pot, and cook it into a stew for a paleontological dinner party. It tastes of beef jerky, deep earth, and mushrooms. The researchers chew and swallow muscle fibers flash frozen during a glacial epoch. Their modern digestive tracts process proteins forged in a lost geological era. The tissue remains viable. The muscle fibers hold their structure. Modern stomach acids break down the ancient flesh just as they process a modern animal. We treat this realm as a passive museum. We uncover the 2,500-year-old Siberian ice maiden, preserved in her icy tomb. Her delicate skin holds firm. Her intricate, sweeping tattoos survive unmarred by decay. We find her buried with a pouch of cannabis, placed there to treat the agonizing pain of her progressing breast cancer. A modern medical parallel, frozen in the brutal silence of the tundra. But the museum wakes up. The silence breaks. Listen to the microscopic, high-frequency cracking of the thawing earth. Look close. Deep inside the veins of the 42,000-year-old foal, jagged ice crystals melt into liquid water. The microscopic transition boundary shifts. Frosty, translucent white yields to deep, oxygen-deprived crimson. The thick fluid surges forward through the collapsed arteries after a 40,000-year pause. The physical hardware thaws. But the software carries the true danger. Pythovirus cybericum, an ancient sleeper agent waking from cryogenic sleep. It is a giant virus. It measures exactly 1.5 micrometers in length. In the microscopic world, this is a Leviathan. Lethal. Visually terrifying. Under a high-contrast electron microscope, you watch the mechanics of a waking nightmare. The massive, geometric viral casing drifts through the newly thawed liquid. It locates a living amoeba in the soil. It locks its protein structures onto the host cell membrane. It injects its ancient genetic payload. This is cell nuclei implantation, the forced rebooting of an ancient, dead operating system on modern biological hardware. The giant virus hijacks the cellular machinery of the host. It overwrites the native DNA. It forces the helpless organism to manufacture hundreds of identical Pleistocene clones, until the cell membrane ruptures and the copies spill into the environment. The organism did not die in the ice. It halted its metabolic engines, waiting for the environment to reboot. Now, the environment reboots. This answers the question of what happens when a prehistoric predator thaws. It executes. Biological malware, 30,000 years old, forcing its upload into the modern ecosystem. This is not a theoretical laboratory hazard. It is a documented execution sequence in the wild. An anomalous heatwave bakes the Siberian tundra. The permafrost melts. A reindeer carcass, buried deep in the ice for 75 years, breaches the surface. It meets the open, warming air. The carcass contains dormant anthrax spores. The microscopic spores register the ambient temperature shift. They deactivate their armored calcified shells. They boot up their metabolic processes. They begin to replicate. The resulting biological cascade infects the local ecosystem with terrifying speed. The ancient bacteria enter the bloodstream of modern animals. It wipes out 2,000 reindeer in a matter of weeks. It kills a human child. 75 years of dormancy is a microscopic fraction of deep time. The permafrost holds pathogens sleeping for hundreds of thousands of years. Pathogens that predate the evolution of our species. The antagonist of this reality is not a single giant virus or a preserved apex predator. It is the architectural structure holding them all. The melting vault, a collapsing planetary freezer. It is unfathomable in scale. It covers 15% of the entire northern hemisphere. A continuous, unbroken slab of frozen earth massive enough to swallow continents. It is older than the construction of the Great Pyramids by tens of thousands of years. It holds millions of tons of dormant biology, locked in a delicate thermodynamic balance. And it loses its grip on the monsters it imprisoned. Consider the extreme physical mechanics required to survive in this subterranean prison. Beneath the surface of the Batagayka crater, scientists find the crushed bodies of prehistoric cave lion cubs. They rest under 40 meters of dense, frozen Pleistocene earth. 85 pounds of pressure per square inch. Nearly 12,000 pounds of crushing force per square foot. The frozen sediment compacts their tiny bodies, pressing their thick fur flat against their ribs. The pressure is immense. The temperature is absolute. Yet their organic structures do not shatter under the weight of the earth. Their skeletal chassis yields. They adapt to the geometric constraints of the deep freeze, folding into the ice like compressed data files. These organisms are evolutionary anomalies. They belong to the late Pleistocene. They evolved alongside colossal megafauna in a brutally unforgiving, glacial epoch. They survived the ravages of deep time by deploying the ultimate biological cheat code. They bypassed the decomposition process. Modern organisms die. Their cellular walls rupture under osmotic stress, Entropy claims the biological chassis, recycling the carbon back into the world. But in the deep ice, entropy starves. The permafrost arrests the chemical breakdown of their bodies. It denies modern bacteria the liquid water required to corrode the flesh. It freezes the delicate membranes of giant viruses before they calcify and crumble into dust. They achieve a stasis that defies the fundamental laws of life and death. As the vault fractures, these prehistoric survivors slip through the cracks. They enter a warming world they do not recognize, armed with biological weaponry we have forgotten how to fight. The scale of the threat shifts. It moves from a distant geological curiosity to an immediate, visceral vulnerability within your own body. Your immune system, a highly calibrated defense mechanism. It spends the last 10,000 years updating its software. It learns to recognize local pathogens. It builds complex antibodies to neutralize familiar threats, analyzing the chemical signatures of modern diseases. But your immune system contains a fatal blind spot. It cannot defend against an enemy that went extinct before your ancestors learned to make fire. We construct elaborate, comforting philosophies around our own mortality. We view death as an absolute frontier, a hard stop at the end of a linear timeline. We assume all biology shares this strict limitation. The architecture of the deep ice proves us wrong. These ancient organisms, these microscopic nematodes and giant viruses, conquer the void. They treat time not as an unstoppable current that drags them toward decay, but as an atmospheric pressure they endure. They wait out the epochs. They outlast the rise and fall of human civilizations. Our perception of this frozen environment suffers from profound human arrogance. We believe we are the masters of the chronological timeline. We believe we can dig into the permafrost, extract the ancient biology, and study it safely behind reinforced laboratory glass. We consume the flesh of a 36,000-year-old bison as a culinary novelty at a dinner party, convinced of our untouchable, modern superiority. We treat the deep time survivors as helpless scientific curiosities. We fail to recognize them as an invading force. We pull the pins on microscopic grenades, awakening plagues that possess no natural predators in the modern world. We do not safely uncover history. We initiate its violent return. Return to the sterile laboratory. Return to the steel table, the scalpel, and the ice. Remember the 42,000-year-old foal. At first, the liquid blood seeping from its frozen veins acts as a scientific marvel. A testament to the unparalleled preservation power of the Siberian cold. A miraculous snapshot of a vanished era. As the planetary freezer collapses, that image transforms. The blood is no longer a miracle. It is a haunting biological metaphor. The past is not dead. It does not lock away in sedimentary rock. It bleeds into our present. That dark, oxygen-deprived crimson fluid carries the ancient code. It carries the giant viruses. It carries the dormant anthrax spores. It carries an operating system that refuses to be uninstalled. The strict boundaries between the Pleistocene and the Holocene liquefy. The comforting separation between the ancient and the modern melts into an illusion. We walk on top of a dormant world, oblivious to the machinery booting up beneath our boots. If the ground beneath our feet can pause death for 40,000 years, what else is waiting for the ice to melt?